Hot days are getting hotter, rainy days are getting rainier, downpour all of a sudden, a thunderstorm out of nowhere, flash floods in no time. This is what the world is going through now, and this is what Singapore is going through as well.
Singapore is a small island. We all face a lot of challenges with temperature rises as well as food supplies. If we don't do anything about it, as an association, as Singaporeans, as individuals, how would we ever be able to see the future for our citizens as well as our loved ones? Moving forward, Singapore Press Club is going to celebrate our 50th anniversary in 2021. And part of the agenda for us next year, and starting from this year, is to talk about climate change and a lot of other interesting news agendas. And being a Singaporean and being Singapore Press Club, we are putting together this video to show to the world how Singapore views about climate change, what are initiatives and innovations that Singapore has to go through in order to survive climate change. And we hope you enjoy this video that's put together by our media professionals, club members, and experts of the environment operating in Singapore.
Welcome to Singapore. Singapore is an island, a city-state, 100% urban, and one of the 10 ASEAN countries in Southeast Asia. Popularly known as a red dot on the world map, the tiny island Singapore is about 50 kilometers from east to west and 27 kilometers from north to south. With a modest population of about 5.6 million people, it is one of the developed countries in the world today. Can development be achieved without any cost? Not at all. It comes at the cost of our precious environment. Singapore is well aware of that and dealing with it, as it has a reputation for planning ahead. Singapore took early measures such as managing the growth of vehicle population and switching from fuel oil to natural gas, the cleanest form of fossil fuel, to generate electricity. These early initiatives have helped to moderate the growth of carbon emissions significantly. Continuing its efforts to provide a clean and green environment, Singapore has launched some new initiatives. Sunny Singapore has embarked on developing a floating solar farm which will be able to generate 60 megawatts, enough to power 16,000 four-room housing flats for a year. The floating solar farm will help reduce Singapore's dependence on fossil fuels, slash carbon emissions, and strengthen national climate resilience. Singapore Press Club met with some professionals to find out how and what Singapore is doing to tackle the challenges posed by climate change. Dr. Angela Lee holds a PhD in electrical and electronic engineering in the area of sustainable product development. Dr. Lee is a strong advocate of transforming business practices through innovations in sustainable development. Here is her take on Singapore's Climate Action Plan.
As a Singaporean, I'm proud to share that we do have a national climate action plan that have laid down our 4 key strategies in terms of combating climate change. The first one will be improving energy and carbon intensity of our nation. The second one would be reducing the carbon emission of our power generation. The third one would be developing and deploying low carbon technology in our industry, as well as finally to encourage collective climate action with each and every one of us on this island. Another important one that has been announced would actually be by 2040, we would have phased out non-ICE vehicle on the Singapore roads so that we would have a cleaner environment.
Singapore, like many countries, is trying to adopt a circular economy to deal with all kinds of wastes. Unlike the linear economy, the circular economy focuses on designing waste out of the resource ecosystem and maximizing the value of resources by keeping them in use for as long as possible.
There is great potential for Singapore with the geographic location in the region to develop into a great circular economy hub, looking at the flow of material around the region. Take for example, in the area of electronic waste, Singapore has legislated extended producer responsibility for the producer to be responsible for the electronic products that they put out to market. It is mandatory for a producer to bring back the electrical and electronic products such as television and fridge that they put on market back for recycling, so as to enable a circular economy. In this way, the resource could be put back into manufacturing of new product, so as to reduce the rate of depletion in natural resources from the environment. Initiatives like that would also further encourage more R&D effort into recycling electronic waste, would further incentive and encourage technology in electronic waste recycling to be further developed, so as to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of a system.
In an attempt to strengthen recycling efforts, Singapore launched an institute recently to focus on finance for green research and talent development. The launch of Singapore Green Finance Centre was announced on October 13th this year.
With the setting up of Singapore Green Finance Centre, that will allow Singapore to leverage on our regional financial hub status to bring about a greater change not only within Singapore but also in the region, so as to make sustainable finance as a norm and hence bring about greater impact to environmental sustainability.
From keeping the public informed and acting as a watchdog on errant players to raising awareness, the media has an important role to play in fighting climate change and environmental degradation. Zakir Hussain is Singapore editor at The Straits Times, where he has been for 15 years. He is also the vice president of the Singapore Press Club. As a journalist, Zakir thinks that media is playing an important role in creating awareness and equipping the public about what is at stake.
And I think presenting the science and the possible scenarios of the impact of climate change to our viewers and readers. At the same time, media can also play a role in, for instance, campaigns or encouraging people to change their behavior, to live in a more sustainable way, for instance. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic has brought home the importance of this through everyday examples. Disrupted global supply chains mean that the availability of materials, for instance, the availability of plastic containers for people to take their food in. We saw some of these shortages during COVID-19, and I think that's created some awareness of the need to be sustainable in the way we consume and produce things.
Singapore's oldest and leading newspaper, The Straits Times, collaborates with media in the region to study the issues.
Several years ago, The Straits Times embarked on a massive climate change project. Calling it Climate of Change, I think we cast our net wide. We looked at and tapped on our correspondents in the region to look at how climate change was affecting people in various parts of the region we live in. As an example, rising temperatures are seeing tropical diseases emerge where they had not before. Dengue, for instance, was being detected in northern India and Nepal, where it had never been an issue before. I think media plays an important role in framing an issue, in agenda setting, and in highlighting the importance of an issue to readers and viewers. And I think in recent years, climate change has made up headlines. It's been page one news in our publications. It's been top of the agenda in our videos. We've devoted more resources to covering and explaining the issue of climate change over the years.
Journalists have the unique ability to help accelerate climate action through advocacy and education. Audrey Tan is the Science and Environment Correspondent at The Straits Times, Singapore. She holds a master's degree in climate science and policy from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in the US. She writes extensively about the causes and impact of climate change in Singapore and the region. Audrey Tan on leveraging nature in the fight against climate change.
So the Natural Capital Project is one relatively new research project spanning researchers from various institutions in Singapore that look at quantifying the ecosystem services that nature provides for humanity. So we have heard and seen in scientific literature around the world about the cooling benefit of trees, for example, or how forests can help to reduce flash floods, or vegetation can help reduce flash floods. But how do we quantify that in monetary terms so all these ecosystem services can be factored into policy decisions? So I think this is a key aim for the Natural Capital Group, and it's a very interesting area of research which I'm following closely. But it's not the only research group in Singapore that is looking in this area. So recently, I think just in 2020, earlier this year, we have seen a new research center for nature-based climate solutions being set up at the National University of Singapore. So I think that there's a huge drive to see how we can leverage nature in the fight against climate change, not just in Singapore, but also regionally. Southeast Asia is home to the world's third largest rainforest basin. So it's very interesting to see how the scientific inquiry process develops to see how we can best leverage nature in tackling climate change.
When we are talking about climate change, we cannot help but exclaim about COVID-19 and its impact on nature. Vehicles went off the roads, flights disappeared, people stayed indoors, it curtailed major economic activities, and allowed nature to almost bounce back to its original form. In Southeast Asia, sea turtles are revisiting deserted Thai beaches, air quality is improving in Singapore, and river basins are getting cleaner in Malaysia. Is COVID-19 a wake-up call to businesses and society to do more for the environment?
So Singapore has long had an emphasis on sustainability, and we have seen through previous efforts, like in 2015 we had Singapore Sustainable Blueprint, which aims to increase the amount of cycling paths in Singapore, or to make each household located nearer to a public transport station, or even to increase the number of park connectors in Singapore. So the focus on sustainability here is not new. But I do think that the COVID-19 pandemic and all the changes that it has wrought to human habits, to human behaviors, to the way humans commute and travel, has pushed the boundaries a little in terms of what the ministries have said. The newly renamed Ministry for Sustainability and the Environment, formerly known as the Ministry for the Environment and Water Resources, has talked about the need to envision a post-carbon future for Singapore and the creation of green jobs that could not only benefit the environment but the economy as well. And the Transport Ministry has talked about the possibility of pedestrianising certain roads, because with people's commuting habits change, can that mean that we can reduce the amount of roads, the amount of cars on the streets? So I do think that the pandemic has pushed the boundaries in terms of getting people here to imagine what a more environmentally friendly world will look like. And I think this is a message that's not just in Singapore, but we have seen around the world as well. Right? Countries are using this opportunity to restart their economies by investing heavily in clean industries and growing green jobs for their citizens. So we'll just have to look forward and see what Singapore has in store for us.
Singapore, as a fledgling nation facing great odds since the early days, has always faced its problems squarely. It has even found ways to turn challenges into opportunities. It is with this resolve that Singapore is determined to take on challenges posed by climate change.